let's go to our guest line and bring on our final guest of the day. Pleased to be joined by our good friend Mike McAllister from 24/7 Sports to talk all things SU athletics. Mike, always great to have you on. How was your weekend?
It was good. Getting back home from being out of town, and so it was nice to see my dog again. That's always the best part when you're away for several days or a week. So when you come home and you see your dog for the first time and how excited they are to see you. It's like the first time they've ever seen you. But, yeah, it's good to be back, and glad I avoided some of the crazy weather while I was out, but always good to be back home.
Well, we're glad to be talking SU sports with you again. Let's start with football. And, we've talked so much in the last several months about, pieces that Fran Brown has added to the program. Let's start with somebody that decommitted, this long snapper, Henry Searcy, who committed, then decommitted, and decided that he's going to go to Pittsburgh. Number one, why did this happen? Number two, is it a big deal?
Well, I'll say this. I saw some people in the comments when reporting on the news, reporting on this news that, it's a long snapper, who cares? And all I have to say is typically you don't know who a long snapper is because they're doing their job pretty well. You know who a long snapper is when they're not doing their job very well. But you still want good players at every position, even if it's long snapper and that's not a sexy position or a position most people think about when you're thinking about constructing a football team. So anytime you lose a good player, I'd say it's not a positive thing. But here's the thing. He was not offered a scholarship at Syracuse. He was offered a preferred walk-on roster spot. Same thing with Pittsburgh. And what happened was he came up to Syracuse. He participated in the camp. He got the walk-on offer. He wanted to play major conference football, took the offer, and then Pittsburgh came in with an offer within a couple of days after that. And he had some discussions with his family, and he said Pittsburgh was a little bit closer to his family than Syracuse was, and the tuition was a whole lot cheaper. So that ultimately was what made the decision for him. So ultimately, I don't think it's something that's going to make or break the team. They do have some good long snappers on the roster, and I'm sure they'll find one. But until they do add one, it's hard to say what the impact is because we don't know who we're comparing Searcy to.
As for, you just mentioned that you never like to lose good players to other programs. Along those lines, we saw C.J. May, a four-star pass rusher, over the weekend pick Louisville over the likes of Syracuse and others. I guess go into that recruitment if you can a little bit, and is that a cause for concern at all, or is this just a case of you can't win them all?
I don't think necessarily a cause for concern given how many players they have committed in this class, and most of them were priority targets that they identified early in the process and went after pretty hard. But certainly C.J. May would have been the headliner in the class just because of his ranking and the fact that he's got those 4 stars next to his name. The thing to remember about Syracuse's class is even though they don't have a 4-star per se, they do have several players that are high 3 stars, sort of just on the outside of the 4-star, and they have more of those guys than what they have typically had in the past. When you think about the last several years, last year excluded, under the previous coaching staff. So that's something to keep in mind. I think obviously when you lose a guy that's that highly rated or don't land him, lose out to another program, there's some negativity to it. That said, they're not going to stop recruiting him. There's still 5 months until signing day. You never know what can happen. And as we saw what happened at the end of last recruiting cycle after the coaching change and all of the work that Fran Brown did in a matter of a few weeks, I'd say that we really need to wait and see how the rest of the cycle pans out, how players they have currently committed move up or down in the rankings before, we overreact too much to a single decision.
We were talking about this last week about the class of 2025, and I think at the time we said that there were 28 verbal commitments for the class of 2025. 26 of them were 3 stars. Do you look at that as a positive, or do you look at it as a negative that there's no 4 or 5 star? I mean, how do you What do you say to SU fans about the fact that there's no 4 or 5-star recruits right now in that class, but 26 of the 28 are 3-stars, which is still better than we've been seeing around here, correct?
Yeah, so there's still a step up in terms of the talent level that you're bringing in, and you evaluate that more than just looking at 3 stars. And as I alluded to earlier, not all 3 stars are created equal. There's a range. If you go to the 24/7 Sports player profile for a recruit, there's a number next to that 3-star. It'll say 86, 87, 88. That's basically a scale of 1 to 100, and once you get to 90, you get to 4-star status. And usually anything that's, I'd say 86 to 89 are considered high 3 stars and sort of just on the cusp of getting to 4-star status. And Syracuse is getting more of those. I'd say more quality 3 stars than what they've had in the past. On top of that, they're getting more players that have major conference offers than what they had in years past as well. So you're getting guys that have offers from several of your regional recruiting rivals. We noted that they've landed some commitments. Gabe Davis, probably most notably recently, that had offers from SEC programs. Eric Thomas did as well. So they're getting players that other highly regarded programs want. And so even if the rankings by recruiting analysts don't necessarily follow, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Fran Brown knows exactly what he wants at each position. He's going after those attributes, and he trusts his eye and his ability to identify talent more so than just strictly going by recruiting rankings. So Syracuse feels good about where they are. The coaching staff really, really likes the class. I can tell you that they think that there's at least a handful of players in the class that they view as 4-star caliber talent, and think that the recruiting services are wrong in terms of their evaluation of them. So, we'll see how it ends up playing out. But if the coaching staff feels good and you trusted the coaching staff going into this recruiting cycle, then I think as a fan, you should trust where they are going in terms of building this.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. You mentioned a moment ago that, they're not going to stop recruiting C.J. May and that there are still 5 months between, now and signing day. It works both ways, right? Like if Syracuse has a great season, they may get some extra recruits that flip from other schools. If they don't have a good season, it could work the opposite way, right? I mean, I guess, can you speak to, every season's important, but just how important this season is for Fran Brown and this coaching staff to get off to a good start, to really build upon the momentum that they've established the last several months?
Yeah, because what you want to avoid really is sort of being right around 500 all season, and even if you do end up making a bowl game at 6-6 or 7-5, I think that allows other programs to say they had all this hype, they brought in all this talent, and they're still right where they've always been. That's Syracuse. That's their ceiling. Why would you want to go there? And so it makes it easier for other teams to negative recruit against Syracuse. And while I think negative recruiting doesn't work a lot of times, it does work sometimes. There's a reason that coaches do it, and it's because it does help them in some instances. And so could you see a situation where Syracuse goes 6-6 and 7-5, and loses a couple of their better recruits because other teams are able to change their mind? I could see that as a scenario that is realistic that could play out. On the flip side of it, Syracuse could end up going 9-3, 10-2, and that allows the current coaching staff to go out on the recruiting trail and say to guys like C.J. May, guys like Cameron Smith, who's a 4-star that's currently committed to Duke, that Syracuse had up for an official visit last month and is still actively recruiting. Syracuse can go to those guys and say, listen, we had all this hype. We were considered one of the dark horse teams. We brought in this talent and the players that Fran Brown said we needed to take us to the next step. We took that next step. You want to be part of what we're building because it's only up from here. That helps Syracuse's pitch. That helps the coaches when they go out on the recruiting trail. It prevents that negative recruiting from other teams. And then if a team like Duke goes 6-6 or 5-7, you go to Cameron Smith and say, they just had a coaching change and took a huge step back. We had a coaching change, took a huge step forward. We're much closer to home than they are. We think you should reconsider.
One more football question for you. We saw Jaden Mann, offensive tackle, not sign with the Orange, commit to the Orange. High school teammates with the recent quarterback commit, Rich Beelan from Cardinal Hayes down in the Bronx. What do you know about Jaden Mann, and what kind of fit is he for this team?
Really, really athletic offensive lineman, 6'4", 6'5". I know he's listed as a tackle. Wouldn't surprise me if he ends up playing along the interior because, as we've seen from what Fran Brown likes with his offensive tackles, he seems to want them to be 6'7" or taller. That seems to 6'6", 6'7" or taller. That seems to be the consistent theme. So the fact that Jaden Mann is around 6'4", 6'5", I'm guessing he'll end up at guard. But again, that's just a guess from me at this point. Still, he was someone Syracuse, again, identified early when Fran Brown took the job in the 2025 cycle, recruited him extremely hard, had an official visit. They survived official visits from other schools, Georgia Tech, West Virginia, and Rutgers. So, again, someone with multiple power conference offers. He had a bunch of others as well. And it just continues what Syracuse has been doing this cycle, which is landing really good players in New York State. He was ranked, I think, 9th in New York State by 24/7 Sports. I know some other places have him a little bit higher than that. So a really nice recruiting win, and you can never have too many quality offensive linemen. So I think Syracuse is pretty happy with that win.
All right, let's switch gears to basketball. We talked a lot about the class of 2025 for football. What do we need to know about how the class of 2025 is shaping up for basketball?
Well, we know that they've got Sadiq White committed, who is a top 20 player in the class, and then they've got several others that they're prioritizing. You know, Tyler Jackson, who is good friends with Kean Anthony, who we know that Syracuse is recruiting really hard. Nigel James is someone that they were previously linked to, but he is down to his final 3, and Syracuse is not in it. They haven't really been actively recruiting him much. Keyshawn Tillery is an interesting point guard because Syracuse has recruited him. They have had him up for visits, but he's scheduling some officials to other schools. He's someone I would kind of keep an eye on a little bit. Jerry Easter, they've been involved with a little bit. But the guard that I think is the most intriguing right now is Caden Lewis, who is a Washington, D.C. kid. And Syracuse offered him, and then after they offered him, he's really blown up and picked up offers from seemingly every blue blood. He's down to 6 schools. Syracuse is one of those 6 schools, and he says he wants to take official visits to each of those 6 before making his decision. So Syracuse is still actively and recruiting him extremely hard. They hosted a 6'6" wing prospect, Ryder Frost, for an official visit within the last few weeks. So he's someone else that they're targeting and prioritizing. And at the center spot, Chris Sainick from Link Academy in Missouri is someone that Syracuse offered. And then shortly after they offered, similar to a Caden Lewis, a bunch of high majors and blue blood extended offers as well, and he's taken a huge jump in the recruiting rankings. He is up to 14th overall by 24/7 Sports as a 5-star prospect. But Syracuse has been recruiting him and watching him during AAU season quite a bit. So those are kind of the guys that are the priority targets at the moment. But, it doesn't seem like any of them are really on the verge of a decision anytime soon.
Mike, last time you were on, we were talking about that rumor about, a player from overseas that Adrian Autry and his staff that we're considering adding for this coming season. Have you gotten any sort of update or any clarity on what that situation is and if there's any truth to it?
Okay, so this is not direct firsthand information. This is sort of my gut feeling at the moment. I think there is some validity to it. I don't have a name. I don't have any concrete evidence from it, but just based on some of the things I've heard, some of the things from talking to sources that have been communicated to me, it seems like there is a situation that they're trying to get figured out to get someone onto the roster, but I don't have any type of time frame as to when that could happen. I don't have a name, and I don't know anything further than that at the moment. But I do think that there is at least one or two prospects that they're evaluating or looking at to try to add to the roster. I know they want to use that to add another big to feel like they've got enough depth going into next season.
All right, and then last question from me is just I always ask you about Kyan Anthony. I think, the assumption is that Syracuse is the front runner. Do you have any sort of idea on when he may make his college choice final?
I don't have that information yet. I've heard some conflicting things as far as some people thought that maybe after AAU season, he would start to look at that, maybe going into his senior year, sort of early fall. But every report that we've seen recently says that he's telling people he wants to take several more visits before deciding. And so if that's the case, chances that those all take place this summer, not impossible, but perhaps a little bit on the slimmer side. It's more likely this goes into the fall a little bit, and that perhaps before his senior season starts, maybe he decides to make a decision at that point. But he hasn't put any sort of time frame out there publicly that's extremely firm, or this is the exact time, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. So we're kind of all in wait and see mode. But I think the buzz is still that Syracuse is considered, if not the favorite, one of the strongest favorites for sure.
All right, great stuff as always, Mike. I know you'll keep us posted on any developments. Glad you're back from vacation. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Great to talk to you. Thanks, guys.
All right, our good friend Mike McAllister joining us.
Steve,
Paulie,
listeners, everybody gather around. Got something to tell you. All right? If you would like to have lunch with Fran Brown at a special event held by us being us, get on QSportsTalk.com right now and sign up, because within the next 40 minutes, we will pick one person that has subscribed to Q Sports Talk to win said lunch. You have to be a subscriber to Q Sports Talk to win. Thank you.
this is a random drawing?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how it's done, but it's random. My whole life's random, Steve. How was your weekend?
It was good. We had my son Luke had his 18th birthday last Thursday, and then my little guy turned 4 on yesterday. So we
lots of parties.
It was lots of parties, a lot going on. How about you?
I didn't do anything, Steve.
That's good.
I didn't do much. I did laundry. Lots of walks. I walked on a dog lake. It's beautiful over there.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell anymore. It's great.
The weather was nice too. It was a beautiful
I
weekend.
recommend a good walk on the Parkway any chance you can. Not the actual Parkway, but you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yes. The part you can walk on or rollerblade on.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
People still rollerblade.
I know. Yeah.
Remember how that was like huge?
It looks like fun.
I bought a pair.
I've never rollerbladed.
Yeah.
I've roller skated when I was younger. I've never rollerbladed, but it looks fun.
All right. Moobot will be doing the drawing. Apparently.
Okay. Good to know. Glad we cleared that up. All right. We'll take a time out here. Phone lines open the rest of the way if you want to check in. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.
I just decided to make small talk at the end of that segment just to kill a little time.